After more than 30 years in ERP implementation work, something changes in your perspective. You look at each implementation one at a time. One client, one project, one go live. But after enough of them, that stops being the right lens, because over time, the implementation becomes a laboratory. Patterns emerge. As an implementation leader, the goal is always the same. Client succeeds, the team succeeds, and the work creates real value. But the truth is, that doesn't always happen every time. And that bothers me. So the question for me became why? Why are the variables that actually determine the outcome? Are there multiple variables that matter? A bad methodology will hurt you. Inexperienced consultants will hurt you. A weak project manager will hurt you. Those are real and those are obvious. But what I kept finding was that even when you control for all of those variables, even when you have the right partners, the right team, the right methods, there's still a variable that separates the organizations that generate sustained value from the ones that do not. I've seen the same services team using the same methodology, implementing the same general ERP footprint with organizations of similar size and industries, and still getting different outcomes. One becomes a value-generating engine, and the other never gets there. That is what pushed me to go back through all my own history and start analyzing it differently. And the more I dug in, the more convinced I became that the hidden variable, the one that nobody's examining, is the operating model, or the lack of one. That's the pattern I keep coming back to. And that's why I believe ERP success is rarely just a software story. It's an operating model story. This series is about the variable nobody's talking about. Before I go further, let me be clear about who this series is for. There are two scenarios where this operating model applies. The first, you're preparing to replace or modernize your ERP. You're staring down a major implementation and you want to build the value delivering engine during the implementation, not after it. Inside that first entry point, there's a pattern I see more often than you might think. I call it the software replacement reflex. New leadership comes in, looks at the current ERP, and concludes the software is the problem. So the organization starts moving towards a replacement. A new vendor, a new implementation, major capital spend. But the harder question was never asked. Is the platform actually the problem? Or has the organization lost the operating model required to generate value from it? What I call the operating drag trap. Technical debt builds up, workarounds become permanent. You're the frog in the boiling water. You do not even realize how much burden you've taken on. Your team gets so consumed by the run burden that it can no longer absorb the innovation the vendor keeps releasing for the platform you already own. This creates the debt drag, compounding loop. Capacity gets drained by maintenance, so teams deploy hastily workarounds to meet new demand, which immediately creates more technical debt, which drains more capacity. This loop consumes all delivery capability. And once that happens, leadership concludes they need new software. Sometimes replacement is the right answer, but without a value generation engine, you buy again and recreate the same failure pattern under a different vendor name. This is why I come back to the same principle: readiness before replacement. The second entry point, you already have an ERP in production. It went live, but the value you expected has either never fully materialized or it has eroded over time. You need to establish or strengthen the operating model to restore strategic throughput. Two different starting points, same destination, same engine. And in both cases, leadership has to design two future states: the software future state and the operating model's future state. If you only design the software future state, you will create the same post-go-live failure pattern, just under a new label. So let us start with the structural failure that causes most of this pain. If you've ever taken a PMP course or managed a formal project, you learned this definition. A project is a temporary endeavor with a defined start and end date. This is textbook project management, and it works beautifully for things like building a parking garage or launching a marketing campaign. I call this the temporary project fallacy, or if you want to be more direct, the PMP fallacy, taking a correct definition of a project and applying it to the wrong kind of enterprise capability. Because an ERP is not a temporary endeavor, it's a perpetual operating capability. Finance, HR, supply chain, every one of those functions depends on this very system every single day. It does not stop when the project stops. Yes, that is exactly how most organizations treat it. We frame the ERP as a project, we fund it as a project, we staff it as a project, and then when the project ends, when we hit go live, we declare victory, disperse the team, and move on. What happens next? The system starts to stagnate. The people who understand it are gone. Technical debt accumulates, and the business starts working around the system instead of through it. This is not a software failure. This is a structural failure. We treated a perpetual value delivery engine like a temporary installation. Here's the shift. The implementation project delivers the software. The operating model delivers the engine. The project starts and stops. The engine is perpetual. Now, if you've been through an ERP implementation, you've seen this play out. The business comes to the table and says, we want everything, every module, every feature, every integration, all on day one. I call this the Cadillac fallacy. And here's what is important to understand. The business is not being irrational. They're being very strategic within the system they've been given. They demand the Cadillac on day one because they have zero trust that the organization will deliver anything after go live. They know from experience that once the project ends, the funding dries up, the team is dispersed, and everything that was supposed to happen in phase 2 never materializes. So when you walk into a room and say, we'll handle that in phase 2, you can feel the eyes roll. Phase 2 is where scope goes to die, is what they're thinking. And that creates a vicious cycle. Business demands massive upfront scope to protect themselves. Massive scope increases the risk. Risk increases the cost and timeline. The project struggles. Trust erodes further. Next time, they demand even more. This is the cycle we have to break. The solution is what I call the dual track mandate. To reduce implementation risk, phase 1 has to be utility first, not fully imagined future state sold in the proposal. Not the Cadillac, the smallest useful capability the organization can actually absorb and sustain. Think of it as a minimum viable product, MVP, but defined by organizational readiness, not just software features. But that only works if the operating model is built at the same time. The project delivers the software, the operating model delivers the engine. When the business can see the engine, govern it, cadence, capacity, and accountability, phase 2 stops, sounding like an excuse and starts sounding credible. And when they trust that, they stop demanding the Cadillac on day 1. Let me make this concrete, because this is something I live. A vendor closes a deal, the customer has chosen the software and the application footprint. The service partner puts together a statement of work, a methodology, a team, a timeline. And then they call the project manager, someone like me, and they say, here's the scope, here's the team, here are 12 months, go to work. I show up at one client and I ask, who's your team? And they say, We have one analyst. She covers everything. And we have an infrastructure team and a security team. But the business applications, basically her. Nobody's focused on delivering new value from the existing software. Silos everywhere. No governance, no delivering cadence. And I can see the outcome before we start. It does not matter what the salesperson promised. It doesn't matter what the statement of work says. The gap between what has been sold and what the organization is ready to sustain is enormous. Now I go to a different client, similar size, similar industry. This client has 15 analysts across the domains. They have internal project manager. Their business leaders have maturity around what they need. They're not expecting the fully automated experience on day one. They want the foundation. They understand that phase one is a utility first, and they trust phase two will happen. Same project manager, same team, same methodology. Very different probability of success. This is the maturity scope mismatch. A polished statement of work, an experienced partner, and a sound methodology still do not guarantee success. If the client doesn't have the operating model maturity to absorb the implementation ambition, and that mismatch is invisible if you are not looking for it. So what do I mean by operating model? The enterprise ERP operating model is the enterprise's value generation engine for ERP. It aligns people, processes, and technology so that every hour capacity is governed through a single lens, business value. And let me be clear, this is not just an IT operating model. IT facilitates it and instruments it, but it's governed by operational leadership because ERP value is created across business dependencies, finance, HR, supply chain, operations, and the processes that connect them. When upstream discipline breaks, downstream outcomes break. That's why there has to be an enterprise contract between operations and IT. Here's the root pain it solves. Every IT leader I've worked with is trapped in the same cycle. Infinite business demand. The business wants more features, integrations, more modules, and because the business cannot see the limits of IT's capacity, they assume it is infinite. Expectations are never met. IT teams are overwhelmed. The operating model breaks that cycle by translating IT operations from a subjective black box into a visible, constrained control equation. At the foundation, you have governed delivery supply. This is the delivery horsepower you can actually govern. Internal capacity, governed augmentation from services partners, or some blend of the two. Net of the friction required to use it all. It's measurable, and the first thing most organizations have never quantified. The supply gets consumed in 3 ways. First, operational workload. Run. The non-operational work. Incidents, service requests, compliance changes. User support is the baseline of your capacity. Second, strategic initiative allocation. Growth, the enhancements, new modules, transformation project. This is where value is created. But it only happens if you have capacity left after the run takes the share. Third, continuous improvement. This is a permanently reserved slice dedicated to reducing future operational burden. Automation, process optimization, knowledge engineering. Continuous improvement systematically shrinks your future run workload. It manufactures future strategic capacity without requiring a single additional headcount. And governance has to allocate that constrained supply. It does not create capacity. It makes trade-offs visible, forces the organization to prioritize based on value. Underneath all of this sits the portfolio complexity. Every additional application, integration, customization, or vendor dependency increases the support burden and multiplies your run workload. The application portfolio, what you operate, is how you operate it. What is left after all of that consumption? That's your net strategic throughput, your actual ability to deliver new value to the business. If that number's negative, you're running beyond sustainable limits. If it's near zero, innovation stalls. If it's positive and control, you have strategic headroom, the ability to respond, invest, and transform. This is the value lens. What value is expected? How will it be measured? And what run burden, complexity, or load will it introduce? In part 2, I'm going to open up each of these components and show you how the engine actually works. Some of you might be thinking, we have operated our ERP for years without a formal operating model. Why does this matter now? It matters because the environment has changed. In healthcare, margin pressure is relentless. Workforce shortages are not getting better. Cybersecurity threats are accelerating. Regulatory requirements are expanding. And AI is now a board-level question. It deserves a strategy. I've spent 3 years working with AI tools in my own consulting practice. And here's what I've learned. AI is extraordinarily powerful. It has made me more productive than ever. My AI experience is a better version of me, and it's true for organizations too. The ones that embrace it will outperform the ones that do not. But AI is an accelerator, not an engine. It amplifies whatever structural condition already exists. If your operating model is governed and instrumented, AI accelerates value delivery. If your operating model is chaotic, AI will make you perform broken processes faster and at a greater velocity. You will think you're realizing value, but you are not. AI will not fix structural weakness. It will expose it. So if you're sitting in a boardroom being asked about your AI strategy, my honest advice is this: answer a different question first. Do you have an operating model? Because without one, AI is just a faster way to do the wrong things. Let me leave you with this. The shift I'm asking you to make is not complicated, but it's fundamental. Stop treating your ERP like a temporary project and start treating it like a permanent value engine. The implementation is just the first time you turn the engine on. What determines whether the engine generates sustained value or slowly becomes a liability? That's the operating model. And if you're preparing for replacement, remember this: you're not designing one future state, you're designing two: the software future state and the operating model future state. In part 2, I'm going to open up the engine and show you the control architecture underneath. We'll go deeper into governed delivery supply, the zero-sum game between run and grow, and how governance becomes an authoritative steering wheel, not a bureaucratic committee. Until then, here's the question I want you to sit with. Can you quantify your ERP delivery capacity right now? Do you know your run-grow ratio? If you cannot answer these questions, you are operating in the dark. High-performing enterprises earn the right to innovate. They do not by buying the newest software, but they institutionalize the discipline required to sustain continuous value generation. This series is designed to turn the lights on.